The desert southwestern United States conceals a great many secrets, and here today I'm going to be exposing one of them for you in my newest Wasteland Spotlight. The rusting remains of a fortified Doomsday prepper compound once populated by religious fundamentalists who eventually fell from grace and turned criminal. Their doomsday ended up coming a little faster than they had expected. So, let's take a look, and welcome to the Wasteland. Hey everyone, this is Chris and you're watching Wasteland by Wednesday. I'm out here once again to shine a spotlight on another Wasteland attraction, this time the crumbling remains of an old religious cult stronghold. Other than the well-cleared fields of fire all around the place, one of the first things of note for an observer is the extensive amount of barbed and concertina wire used in the fences. We can see all that here as we approach from the backside, in addition to all the debris, wooden boards, and other stuff they use to reinforce the fence and conceal the inside of the compound from view. Looking along from above, we can see some of the effort that was made to create a cleared area even outside of the property boundaries. For example, the old truck here that you see is on BLM land, not compound property. Here's a quick chance for you to go ahead and subscribe to the channel to catch future videos if you're interested in this sort of thing. For those who have already been following me or who have just seen some of my videos in the past, you already know I like to showcase these little hidden wasteland points of interest because it gives you something cool to look at and explore while I talk about whatever collapse or prepping related details the location brings to mind. This place in particular brings up a lot because it was once a kind of a prepper compound and one that failed for a variety of reasons. Learning from the mistakes of others is a great way to find value in those mistakes, and so we will see what we can learn here today. One thing I do want to mention before we get to exploring here is that I don't really recommend going out and investigating such places yourself, at least not casually and certainly not for fun. Quite a bit of crime took place here when it was up and running, and given the criminal attractiveness of its isolated location, it has actually been used for a few things since that time by other groups. There's a lot of that out here in the desert, and places like this are often used as rally points and meetups and temporary bases for human traffickers, smugglers, and even drug manufacturers. Keep those dangers in mind when investigating your own area of operation. Scouting is most definitely a necessity, and checking out places like this is pretty much a requirement of prepping for your area and where you're going to be, but just make sure you don't run afoul of any nefarious elements. This place has a real post-apocalyptic feel to it as we look over a rusting fence line that really wouldn't be out of place in a Fallout video game. If you look, you can see how patchwork repairs have been made over the years, as well as the little jury-rigged reinforcements put together out of spare wire and old materials. But, inevitably, there's always a way inside. This old school bus is just one of many strange vehicles present here, things that most people wouldn't necessarily expect to find in such a place, but it's actually quite a bit more common than you would think. A lot of these old buses were either sold off at auction or possibly even stolen, you never know. But it's a common thing to convert buses like this to recreational vehicles or even living quarters. At the end of the day, it's still a nice, big, wide open, and well-lit space that can be used for quite a few things. I wonder what was on these old audio tape reels. Prayers, perhaps? Pickup trucks, sedans, beetles, vans, and semi-trucks, this place has a little bit of everything. Truth is, many of these vehicles were actually stolen long ago, something I know from learning about the history of this place and also from running a few VIN numbers myself. Most weren't worth recovering once the doom descended on this place, and they were kind of left here as monuments to folly and waste. While we cruise around and take a look at everything here, I plan to bore you with a very important but unentertaining lesson which you can find. Because there's a very great lesson to be found here in this place. Well, there's a few lessons, certainly, but one in particular that stands out above the rest. Putting aside the religious weirdness and all that, which I'll get into momentarily, this was a place where people had worked to create a refuge that would allow them to survive after a societal collapse. However, it didn't even allow them to survive long enough to reach collapse, and that is where our chief lesson of the day resides. There is one overriding concern that needs to be considered when looking to form any sort of group for such a long-term living and survival situation, okay? That concern is agreement. Everyone must agree. You must be on the same page, okay? The people that make up the group must be like-minded so that the group itself can be single-minded. Does that make sense? There must be agreement. There can't be any argument or conflict regarding the direction things will be going. Everyone needs to operate according to the direction of the group, but even more importantly, everybody must want to do so. Grudging acceptance is not the same as eager participation, and it just leads to issues down the road. Why is that? Well, while preppers tend to focus their effort at preparing for external threats like war, disasters, and other stuff of that nature, often the biggest danger to any group comes from within, and very few groups are prepared to defend against that. Making sure your group is willingly dedicated to the cause and in complete agreement is paramount. Otherwise, you run the risk of having different members trying to do different things down the road, and at best, this can waste time and resources, but at worst, it can lead to internal disruption and eventual conflict that can wreck a group from the inside. And yes, I'm aware of the irony that what I am describing sounds a lot like how a cult operates, but there's still a difference, and that difference is willingness. See, what we had here was a group of religious fundamentalists and their families. Now, while most of the men who formed this place were in agreement originally and willing participants, most of the women and children were not. And that's how groups often go when the basis of the group is religion. There are some true believers, obviously, but then there's others who they're just kind of going along to get along, here because they either have to be or they just got born into it. So, when you do start to form a group, you need to make it focused around the goal itself, not around any other factors like religion or politics or any of that. My own prepping group has quite a bit of diversity in terms of our political and religious beliefs, but those things are still all secondary to the agreement we share regarding the coming collapse of civilization. We differ quite a bit when it comes to how we think collapse might play out, when it'll happen, and even why it's inevitable, but the core value we all share up front is that agreement that it is inevitable and it's coming soon. That single fact is what our entire group is formed on and what our collective decisions are based around. And because we all agree with that and hold it above everything else, it means we always have that common ground to meet on. Without such common ground, it's hard to be able to agree to anything else. As a side note, for those who may be interested more in my own group and why we're set up the way we are, I do have another video about that, which I'll link right here above if you want to go check it out. Anyway, back to our little talk. So this place here was formed by the religious fundamentalist followers of a man named Bill Gothard. I'll be delving into that more deeply in a moment, but for now we can just talk about why that caused the group to fail in the first place. Now, I'm not here to talk bad about religion or any of that. I'm just trying to show why it isn't such a great idea to make that the foundational basis for a survivalist group. Here, with our Gothardites as they were known, the family patriarchs were completely on board, but the teen and adult children of them were not quite so devout. As will happen, some of them got into drugs, primarily meth, and started to do things that were a threat to the entire group. They still were acting for the group, at least in their own minds, as some of the later police statements revealed, but they were stealing cars and supplies to stock up for Armageddon. Obviously, this isn't the right way to do it, of course, and high on drugs isn't the right state of mind to be making any decisions about important things. In the end, it was this different mentality and mindset between the founders of the group and those who came later that led to their collective downfall as law enforcement eventually got involved, with the predictable results. And that's the lesson to be found here, all right? Some side lessons too, such as don't be an idiot who does drugs and steals cars, but the primary lesson is always to make sure that everyone in the group is truly on the same page. Trust is incredibly important as well, but again, without agreement in the first place, trust can be a lot harder to build. If you can't have that kind of agreement, then you probably need to reconsider the group membership entirely. And that pretty much concludes my sermon for today. We can take a good look around parts of this place and get an idea of what they were up to. Strange place for an outhouse right here, directly inside the front gate. You can see a little of how well they tried to fortify this gate and keep it from being easily seen through. There's a lot to check out inside, but let's go out and get a look at the area in front of the gate first. There's a few interesting features outside this inner fence that I'm sure you'll want to see. The aerial view here shows the smaller fenced-in area passing through the upper right of your screen right now. The trailer there was, I believe, the actual living space for the group leader, so we'll definitely want to take a peek in there. But first, we'll take a good look at this inner fence line barricade. Okay, there's an outer fence line a little ways away, which is primarily just chain link topped with concertina wire, but this inner one is what we are interested in. We can see just how much material was used to reinforce the fence and also the gate areas. Now, keep in mind that even apparently flimsy looking barricade enhancements such as these can serve other purposes beyond just adding some strength to the fence. Their main added advantage is that anyone trying to scale the fence will end up making much more noise than they would going over a nice, clean bit of chain link. Remember, defense isn't all about strength all the time. Sometimes it can be about canceling out the stealth of others, and that is the purpose most of this fence junk serves. We have a strange little watchtower or gate entry building here, perhaps one that never got put to use. It was probably going to be used as an entry guard shack for access control. That would be my guess, anyway. The semi truck over here is probably one of the ones that have been stolen along with cargo and then brought here and parted out. Most of the crimes people were accused of here was actually stealing loaded trucks right from truck stops where they were left running while the drivers went inside to take care of whatever business they had to. I guess that's one way to get supplies, just not a smart one. As you can see, we're outside the front gate here, and there are three structures to investigate. One there with its own fence was the leader's, but let's go check the others first. Some seriously aged root beer right there. Old pair of shit kicker cowboy boots. And hey, we got the 2005 Sports Illustrated swimsuit calendar. Marissa Miller, I think, on the cover. This trailer is pretty well tore up, but it's not really vandalized yet. Most of this damage was done simply by time and the elements and the animals of the desert out here. I know a lot of the stuff that got left behind after the group was broken up ended up being looted by a few of the group's straggling members and others, I'm sure, but the general lack of graffiti and burned buildings tells me that the usual vandals haven't found the place yet. Now we can make our way over to the other trailer here. This one's a bit more fortified with its own additional fence, chain link, as well as some sections of wrought iron. And a little wrought iron gate at the entry. Definitely the home of the patriarch or the grand poobah or whatever they called him. Front deck made from pallets. That's nice. Renew, reuse, and recycle, right? Golf balls. The leaders are always playing golf, even out here. Definitely a mess here, but again, not deliberately destroyed beyond what hasty evacuation and a SWAT raid will accomplish. Make our way through here. Got lots of bird nests. Old brandy bottle. Very gross peanut butter. I thought these were meat sticks, but I guess it's the remains of pasta. Remember, my friends, metal and glass storage is best. Rodents and such will get through everything else eventually. #1 dad mug. Huh. And I look like an idiot trying to get this old fridge open. But hey, here's that metal storage thing, and got some canned ham, long expired, but can is still intact and it's not puffed up, so maybe I'll have a little sandwich later? Probably not. A little rolling tobacco. Chunky beef stew here. Can looks fine. Can't make out the date. Quite a few food items still intact, and in this desert heat, too. Definitely have to be in a post-collapse situation to eat it for sure, but it's all been here well over 10 years, so I'd say it's in pretty good condition for that. Now, as I cruise around and showcase some more of this huge location, you should try a little exercise that I do whenever I'm going through a place like this. Kind of like a little role-playing game, okay? What I'll do is I'll pretend that this is a real post-collapse situation, and somehow I have ended up here alone and stuck with nothing other than what's on me and what I have in the Jeep. As I cruise around, I'll create little imaginary tasks for myself. I would need to build some things for sure, such as a good shelter. I'd certainly need to set up a rain catchment system as soon as possible. There's decent precipitation out here, but it doesn't last long when it comes, so I'd have to be ready to catch every drop. Stuff like that. As I'm walking around, I will look for things that would help me build those other items that I could need in a post collapse world. Are there intact barrels I could use to hold water? Maybe piping and sheet metal that I could use to guide rain runoff? Tools that could be salvaged and repaired? This can be a useful exercise and can often help you come up with new ideas for use in your own bug out locations, or even remind you of stuff that you should try out for practice. And something I was reminded of myself when I started this little trip was the fact that I still need to try out some old instructions I have for building a wind power generator out of an old alternator and fan blades. I actually saw it done on YouTube, believe it or not, and I kind of want to try it. Anyway, think about all the stuff that you see as we're walking around and how you could put it to use in your own post-collapse plans. Out here we can see the main front gate entry as it appears from the outside. Uh, it's actually pretty well secure. Probably use a little bit of beefing up, but all in all, for what it is, not bad. We'll go ahead and transition back to the inside here and explore more of this compound. I will go ahead and shut up a little bit here for a while and let you guys just look around in peace for a few minutes. Maybe try out an exercise in post-collapse planning like I was talking about. In a few minutes, we'll get to one of the items I found here on my initial evaluation of this place long ago, the one that led me down the rabbit hole of cultish history regarding the owners and residents of this place. For now, just enjoy the exploration. I'll explain it all soon enough. And here we find one of this group's primary books, a sort of training manual for how to be a more effective cultist or whatever. I'll go ahead and lay out some of the basics of this group for you, take you to the edge of the rabbit hole, as it were, and if you want to jump in, well, at least you'll know where to start. Okay, so the Institute in Basic Youth Conflicts, as you see on the book cover here, is the former name of the organization later known as the Institute in Basic Life Principles. Now, that's a mouthful, so I'm just going to stick with my favorite Fallout theme here and call it the Institute, okay? Founded by Bill Gothard, the Institute was a nonprofit organization that provided seminars and materials focused on Christian principles for personal and family life. The stated purpose of the Institute was to provide instruction on how to find success in life by following certain biblical principles. Since its inception in 1961, the Institute had grown rapidly, both in the United States and internationally, but later it lessened in popularity due to the inevitable controversy that emerged. In 2008, one group of followers, the Duggar family, rose to celebrity status through the TLC series on TV, 17 Kids and Counting, and its subsequent spinoffs. And that brought a new wave of interest in the Institute and its teaching, made everything kind of popular. However, any positive image of the organization was to be short-lived. From 2009 to 2012, the Institute began a steady decline, losing money, assets, and greatly reducing the number of seminars it conducted, and that was as the public became increasingly aware of controversy in the form of sexual misconduct allegations associated with Bill Gothard. He was the president of the organization at the time and the founder. Eventually, that controversy solidified as allegations of sexual assault from more than 30 women, and it led to Gothard resigning in 2014. Though they didn't admit to anything more than a violation of trust, the Institute's board of directors accepted his resignation and, after their own investigation, concluded that Gothard had acted in an inappropriate manner and was therefore not permitted to serve in any leadership roles. Since that time, Gothard has not been involved in what's left of the Institute in any way, and the organization's website only mentions him in its historical section. But, much like the FLDS Mormon followers of Warren Jeffs, there remained small groups of devout disciples of the Gothard way of doing things. This, despite his fall from grace, or perhaps in defiance of it. They stuck to his original teachings and later became known as Gothardites, although not known very far or wide. I will link the Wikipedia page for them in the description below for those who want to get the precise details, but in general, they weren't much different than most of the cult-like followings out there. Gothard preached a version of male superiority and female obedience. Okay, the men ruled the roost and could do whatever they wanted, and the women were made to be subservient and modest in all things, and the children, well, you can go read up on all that yourself. We know how Josh Duggar turned out, right? Speaking of which, the Duggar family of the aforementioned reality TV fame were closely associated with the Institute and its founder, Bill Gothard. They're deeply involved with his vision of the Institute, and they adhered to its doctrines, using its homeschooling curriculum themselves, and even speaking at Institute events. The Duggar family and their connection to the Institute and to Gothard was extensively explored in the 2003 Amazon Prime docuseries Shiny Happy People, Duggar Family Secrets. Again, I'll leave it to you if you want to dig into all that. In short, when it came to the Gothardites, it was all bad. Now, for this particular location, I'm not going to delve too deeply into what I know about it and the people who used to live here, mostly because I don't want to give away the location that easily to looters and vandals, but it's also because I don't necessarily want to run afoul of whatever dregs of the group may remain lurking about the internet. I have enough threats and crap to deal with. Now, it was a relatively small group that settled here, and according to what I've been able to find, they were a bit eccentric even for Gothardites. As is the case with many of these cultish groups, a biblical apocalypse coming soon to a desert near you began to feature heavily in their beliefs and decision-making over time. It was believed by them that in the time of Christ's return, but before his victory over Satan, there would be a period of war and strife across the world, and during this time, the followers of Christ would have to protect themselves however they could. For our now long-gone residents of this little desert enclave, that meant they needed to fortify themselves against the coming violence. Not necessarily a bad idea, even if the reasons why were faulty. So anyway, they did what they could out here, strung up lots of barbed wire, concertina wire, raised multiple fences and barricades, and established open fields of fire around the perimeter, and strengthened up their fences as much as they could. They amassed a lot of supplies and gear, and in general did many of the prepper type things one does when getting ready for Doomsday. Then they tried to remain as hidden as possible, which usually isn't too hard out here. However, Doomsday came a little early and in a different form than expected, specifically in the form of law enforcement. Again, I'm not going to get into specifics here, but we can just say that there's quite a bit of stolen property out here, and most of the fortifications were completed using the power of meth. So this particular group was quietly but thoroughly broken by a rash of legal consequences, and those few who didn't get wrapped up immediately scattered pretty damn quick before any new evidence could emerge. In the end, the compound fell quietly and without violence, and it has remained fallen to this day. But, fallen or not, it can still serve a few purposes, not the least of which is as the focus of a lesson in what not to do. The bones of this place still remain, and while the location itself isn't ideal, there's a potential here for the site as a source of valuable resources in a post-collapse environment. As I've talked about before, that's one of the main reasons why I regularly go out and investigate and catalog such sites in my own group's area of operations. Knowledge is power, and that will be even more of a fact in a post-collapse world than it is now. I won't be consulting satellite imagery to look around later, and for the most part, I'm going to have to remember where places are, how to get there, and what'll be located there. The best way to embed that information in my memory is to actually go out and see it myself. And so here I am. It does take a lot of time and effort to set up a place like this. Okay, the cost of land out here in the desert is relatively negligible, but the sheer isolation and distance from any services or population centers makes development of such land pretty difficult. It's not like Amazon's just delivering out here, okay? So while we look around here and we see only junk and trash now, we have to also consider that it wasn't always this way. And just imagine the resources needed to do something similar today. You know, getting all these trailers, RVs, and vehicles here took some doing, and it wasn't a low effort type of thing. All right, that's something to consider as well. Another lesson from this place and others like it. The world, especially our little American corner of it, is filled with places like this one. Little monuments to failed preparedness. The reasons for such failure can be internal, as we already discussed, but they can also be external as well. It was a mix of the two here, but it is the latter more often than not for most places. And what I mean by external is this. These places are set up to survive the world after society and civilization is gone. But while civilization still remains, it will intrude and contaminate the workings. In the case of this spot, it was drugs and outside societal influences. In many others, it is simply the lure and appeal of returning to societal interaction that causes the effort to be abandoned. There's really only one way to avoid that, and is actually one of the oldest staple bits of prepper wisdom, which is don't put all your eggs in one basket. Now, what that means is that while you could set yourself and your group up to live separated and isolated in a place like this, you don't have to go all in like that, and you shouldn't. Yes, you must certainly build a place capable of that, but you don't need to sequester your entire group there permanently. Society still exists right now, okay, and there's still much value to be found in being part of it. My own group maintains a place that would put this to shame, but while a couple of us live there permanently out of preference, most only stay part-time and others only visit once every couple months. The work goes on and all have their duties and tasks, but there's no requirement to cut off from society, okay? That day will come, but until then, that society should be taken advantage of. I myself only spend about 1 week each month living out there. Although I did stay for an entire year back in 2023, part of a long-term test of the place. Anyway, my point is this. You must prepare your place for the post-collapse world, but at the same time, you must not abandon interaction with the pre-collapse society entirely. True collapse prepping requires a healthy mix of both. Okay, and besides, air conditioning and Netflix are nice to enjoy while we still have them. As a collapse prepper, you don't want to be that crazy guy out in the woods, okay? You want to be just another regular Joe, working your laptop at the coffee shop, getting groceries at Costco, and bitching to your neighbors about the rising cost of auto insurance. Okay, they don't need to know that you have an apocalypse ready fortress in the mountains, and ideally, they shouldn't even suspect that you do. Us collapse preppers, we don't hide from society. We actually plan to ride it right into the ground and then bail out at the last minute. Such collapse prepping can definitely be a long road, and with time dwindling even as you watch this, it's my advice that you get started right away. As a final note here, something I've mentioned before about other places like this is their value for those who don't necessarily have the time or the resources to set up an extensive bug out location right away. Something that should be done in the interim in case a collapse event kicks off sooner than expected is to scout out and catalog places like this to be used as unconventional bug out locations. Now, I know this place doesn't seem all that great, and you're right, it's not, but for this region, it beats the hell out of being in the open desert with no shelter whatsoever. Societal collapse will quickly turn the urban areas into war zones at best and sheets of glass at worst, and so, as unattractive as this looks, it beats the alternative. There's an abundance of material out here for building, and if you're able to either bring enough supplies with you or pre-position survival caches nearby, it can be an option for those who lack any other alternatives. This place is definitely interesting to explore, and the strange history makes it all the more fascinating. Hopefully, this little glimpse into the wasteland here will give you some ideas, or at the very least, a little entertainment. And I hope you get a little value out of my post apocalyptic rambling as well. Beyond just exploring places for these videos, I try and include as much supplementary material as I can as well. Given the way the world is going, I'm certain that more and more of it is going to look like this in the coming years. Maybe the failure that we see out here today could be the thing that saves somebody else's life in the post-collapse world of the future. Who knows? It's definitely worth it to take a closer look at the hidden and abandoned world around you. You never know when it could come in handy. Okay, thanks for watching. Stay safe and stay ready. It's a wasteland out there.